All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004, that's Mobile APIs and Frameworks, and the summer 2024 semester at Georgian, and it's week 3, part 1 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, we got lots to talk about. So we're sitting at week 3, and this week we're doing some conversion between our Express application that we created last week and an Express API. We talked about that. We've been talking about an API for at least from the beginning, and now we're finally going to do it this week. So that's what's happening today for the most part. That's going to last for a couple of weeks. Actually, probably we're going to be working with the API for the next 4 weeks. That's what's happening. But everything you need for assignment 1 should be completed mostly this week, right? For at least the structure that you need and all that stuff. There might be some additional things or questions you might have for assignment 1 next week, but for the most part, this week we'll patch it all up. We'll have most of the things that we need in there for your assignment 1. So, I'm going to just talk about our schedule for today. Schedule is like this. We're going to convert our project to an Express API. That's what we're going to be doing. And then we're going to be talking about Postman. So if you've used Postman before, this would be great. No problem. If you've never used Postman before, it'll be a new thing for you. You're also going to be, we're going to review a couple things. I want to review NoSQL databases. I know some of you have already done that in your data management class, but some people haven't taken that yet. That's the crazy thing about these courses as well. You can take them completely out of sequence. Some people take data management now as an example, or they're taking next year, I don't know, or next semester. So on that then, so I don't expect that you would know this, and I have to talk about NoSQL databases because of course we're talking about NoSQL database. We have to have a data source for our API. And we're going to use Mongo, of course. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, like really scratch the surface of this stuff. I have a lot of stuff in the slides. I have 67 slides, but I'm not going to talk about all the details in the slides, so I think it's a waste of time. So then we're going to talk about Mongoose, which is the way we're going to connect to Mongo. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to read data from from Mongo, but we need to put something there, and I have some examples of data we can put up there because your idea is you're going to have a movie database. I've asked you for 20 original movies, and I'm going to give you my 10, however many movies that I'm going to add in. And then some of you already have those because you did it in data management. That's awesome. That's just, don't worry about the data. It's not the data that we're trying to worry about anyway with this course. It's really the API, right? So that's why I'm not worried about the content so much. ICE 3, again, is due this Sunday, May 26th at midnight. That's when that's due. And one thing that I didn't put in here is assignment 1. And I'm going to write this in right now. Assignment 1 is due week 4. That's next Sunday, right, at midnight. So what this means is, again, all the assignment 1 details. So please look through the details for assignment 1. I went over them with you last week. I will remind you again next week. So not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, June 2nd, if I'm not wrong, is when this assignment 1 is due. Okay, so that's this one. And I know I got a couple people here. I've also marked all your in-class exercises. For the most part, you guys are doing great. Even though I don't see you very much, you guys are still doing okay with the stuff that you've handed in. Still, I'm getting some weird stuff. For example, I am getting people submitting things that are not YouTube links. So if you don't submit YouTube links to me, you get 0. Some GitHub repositories either are not submitted or they're not accessible. Maybe you didn't share it with me or something else, or the wrong me. I don't know. You get 0 for that too. And if you weren't able to complete your in-class exercise, I gave you part marks. Somehow you didn't do it, or you just fed me back what I gave you with very little changes or something like that, then you also got reduced marks. For the most part, remember that the in-class exercises are your homework to try and get you to understand the process and get your hands in there in terms of understanding TypeScript and Node and Express and all the technologies that we're going to be touching this semester. So I highly recommend you do it. They're worth 40% of your final grade. And remember, to pass this course and every course in the graduate series of programs that we offer, you need a 60%, right? So it's pretty challenging. Okay, so on that then, what I wanted to talk about today from the beginning, from the first thing, was just a really brief review of NoSQL databases. Okay, my assumption, I have to make some assumptions. My assumption is that you already have been exposed to NoSQL databases. And I know I got a couple people here, so Yash Kumar or Sudarshan, am I right? You guys have seen NoSQL databases already? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Professor.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just want to review it for those people who have never done it and you're watching this video at a later time. So, again, let's think about this, what NoSQL databases are, why, what's the reason for them, right? Again, a lot of times we used relational databases for everything, and for years we did that. There was a appetite to reduce the complexity of database storage, and by using a different structure, right? That's number one. And the second thing was, like, why do we, like, for example, let's suppose we don't have a lot of relationships. Why do I need a relational database? That's the question, right? And the other question is, we have a lot of different languages. Back in, we talked about this earlier, back in 2015, we moved to ECMAScript 2015, a whole new version of JavaScript. And we've been pushing towards JavaScript everywhere. JavaScript, in the browser, JavaScript on the back end, in the server, JavaScript, or a JavaScript-like language on the database, right? So that was another reason why we did that. Different kinds of documents and databases, NoSQL databases. We care for key value storage, which is like in kind of like a document storage. But what we want to do with it, and I'm just going to kind of skip through here. What we want to do with it is kind of have this JSON-like data, this JSON-like structure. And that's what NoSQL databases offer us. I'm going to skip through. Again, there's a lot of stuff in here that can help you if you've never done the data management course. I think this is some good information about NoSQL databases, and it's there for you to read if you want to. I think it's some good stuff. MongoDB, of course, is the one that we're using. We're using MongoDB, and that's the type of NoSQL database. There's many different types, and MongoDB is great because, again, we have the ability to create a NoSQL database. It was back in 2007 when it was structured, the same time when Chrome, approximately the same time, 2007, 2008, when Chrome's V8 engine was coming out, when Node.js was emerging, so too was MongoDB. It was almost like happening at the same time. It was all the excitement back then. MongoDB, again, comes from the word humongous. That's where it came from. And we've got lots and lots of contributors to this project. Since then, they've launched, not just MongoDB locally, but of course MongoDB Atlas, which is something we're going to be using today. I'm just going to skip through this. One thing is that they use a BSON format. BSON is like JSON, but it's binary JSON. That's what it's called, binary encoded JSON. And it kind of uses an ID for its key. That's what it is. And the key is made up of there's a process for how to create the key. For example, a 4-byte value representing the seconds since the Unix epoch, which is from 1970, January 1st, 1970. 3 bytes of your machine identifier, what machine you're using. 2 bytes from a process ID, right? And 3 bytes from some kind of random value that they're going to give you, which is kind of interesting, right? Starting from a random value, which is neat. So it doesn't even start at the beginning. And what this does is it kind of more or less guarantees a unique identifier for each of your documents that you're going to submit on MongoDB. Okay, that's what it does. It looks like this, where we have key value pairs. We've seen this kind of thing before, and we're going to kind of delve into this a little bit more. So we don't use select statements. We use something that looks more mechanical or programmatic. So db.post.find. So we're using the find method of posts, where posts is the collection, right? Again, the analogy is, or the analog, the similarity between relational and non-relational databases is things like in a relational database you have tables, in a non-relational database like MongoDB you have collections. In a relational database, in each table you have a series of records, and on MongoDB, instead of each collection has a series of documents. Each document has a series of properties on the MongoDB side. On the relational side, each record has a series of fields, right? That's how it goes. So, I mean, they're very similar in terms of structure. And although you do not need a schema, you do not for MongoDB, we use one. And so now the question is, should you use MongoDB for everything? And I don't think there's one size fits all. I think there's many tools we can use to solve different problems. I think that's definitely true. And so, you know, I don't think I can ever say that, oh yeah, Mongo should be the best. It's the one we should use for everything. No, I think it's good, but I think there's other things we can use too, depending on the situation. All right, so we use the Mongo, you know, kind of a query language, which is what we're using. And I'm just going to kind of skip through this part. MongoDB 3 came out in 2015. Right now we're at MongoDB 7.09 as of May 2024, this month. I've given you a couple links if you wanted to install it locally. And in the past, I would do local installations of your MongoDB server first. And I'm not going to do that this semester. We're going to go straight to MongoDB Atlas because we're going to mostly use Atlas for everything. But if you wanted still to do it, there's the window download link here that I've put it, as well as the macOS install instructions on how to use Homebrew to install your MongoDB server. Do you need to do it? The answer is no. Do I recommend you do it? Not for this semester. I think you're okay with completely working with MongoDB Atlas. I was going to do that next week. I was going to kind of make you, you know, kind of install things locally. But then I was like, you know, mostly we're not going to use it, right? So I don't want to make you do an installation for nothing, right? So MongoDB collections, that's what we just talked about. So again, if the collection is called posts, it would be, hey, database, I want to go into the posts collection and I want to do an insert method or insert operation. That's what this is. And then I'm going to insert a property called title with a value that's first post and a property called user with a value that is Bob. So notice it's still key value pairs, key values, right, for each of the elements or the properties inside of your document. And that's how it looks if we're going to do the command line. We're not doing command line, but the procedure is very similar. Okay, so that's how it looks, and I'm just going to skip through this because it talks about that. We want to do CRUD operations for your assignment 1 and 2. For assignment 1, remember we said all we need is read. All I want you to do is be able to read from the database and then spit out JSON data and test it with Postman, which is what we're going to be doing today, right? So let's take a look at some different kinds of read operations. Come on in. Actually, 2 people showed up. Yay! Right? How you doing? So again, we have different kinds of CRUD operations. One of them, of course, is the CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. You guys should know this already because you've done CRUD operations in the past for maybe different things with your mobile data management, or even in the past in your previous life as a student or programmer, you've done some CRUD operations. And so CRUD operations still, of course, exists on MongoDB. We've done this before, but instead of using create, we use insert, we use update. We don't use save a lot. Save is there as well, but we don't use save as much as update. And we'll talk about how we use these things. And delete, of course. We definitely do delete or remove. So here's an example of what we would do if I was going to do the command line, db.post.insert, like we did before. That is a creation. That's create. And then I'm just going to go back to reading. We use the find method for reading. If we don't specify an object, it reads everything. The object itself that we specify within the find command, again, it doesn't matter if we're using Mongoose, we're going to talk about Mongoose in a bit, or if we're using MongoDB. If we don't specify the document, it's really a filter. And so if you don't filter everything, you get everything. You get everything back. And then you have to kind of convert it. So one part of creating an API is we want to be able to get JSON data back, right? The other part of creating the API is, well, what about what's going to consume the API? So we've talked about this before, and remember that as we go forward in this course, I'm going to get you guys to try out different front ends, like an Android front end, or an iOS front end? How does that look? And we'll be doing that together. And you'll be able to read stuff into iOS or Android. And you have to interpret the data, and that means that you're going to deserialize or decrypt, because that's what it is really. If you get a JSON, your data in a JSON format, what you're getting back is something that you need to convert into an object that you can read and do stuff with, right? That's what you're doing. So again, we filter it with some kind of object typically. And so this is an example, find. We can do that with our commands. And then here I'm filtering for the first time. So when I filter, I'm looking for the user Alice, and then Alice will filter all of their posts in this case, and those are the ones that are going to be returned. Okay, so filtering is what we're doing here. And with Mongoose, we can do the same thing. So for those people who just came in, I've got a document here on SQL databases, on MongoDB. I know you guys have done some of this stuff. I'm just reviewing it so that way you've seen it, and so I'm not, if you haven't ever seen it before, if you never did it before, it's here. You can always read it, but we're going to do it today, which is more interesting than watching me do PowerPoints, right? So this is the thing that we're doing. And there's different ways we can use query operators to do the same thing. Okay, so I'm just going to skip this. We can also use and or. And updating documents are very similar. We can do a update one, we can update all. We can do a lot of different kinds of updates. For updates, what we want to use is the set operator, right? So if you actually look here, there is a set command, and the set command itself, what it does is it sets the we set the property of one. So the first part is filtering. I want for the user Alice, that's the filter, I want to set the title to a new title. And that's interesting when we do it this way. Now, here's something that I found over the years. I never just set one thing. I set all things. So when I do an update, I redo the entire document again. And here's why. Imagine if I have a form field, and the form field, you want to update your last name, okay? Because it's your profile. And it says update your profile. So you go to your profile and you update your last name, and then we could just update that one part. How do I know when the form, which one has been updated? How do I know? I have to do an additional check. I have to check to see which form field has been updated. And then I have to do a check with the database and say, is this different than what's on the database? If it's not different than the database, don't update it. Hold on. That means I'm checking the database to see if I've got an update, right? Somehow. Which is weird. It's extra logic is what I'm saying. So because there's extra logic, we just dispense with that and just update everything. Make sense? We read what we have and then we just redo everything, re-update everything. So even though it allows us to change one thing, I rarely do it. I update everything, typically. Okay? So that's the update. Deleting documents, we use the remove command. Remove command removes one. We can filter, we can remove everything. This drops everything if we did that one. Or we can remove a specific person, user, or we can filter. Again, we're using a filter to remove something from the database. One thing that is true is once you remove something, it's gone. There's no way to get it back. There's no undo or nothing like that in Mongo, right? So when you remove something from the database, please check, make sure you ask the user to, or you recommend to the user that they check to see that things are working out. All right, so that's remove, and that's really it as a review for MongoDB and NoSQL databases. Any questions from the people that are here or the people that are online about anything that I've talked about? So again, we're using a NoSQL database this semester. We're going to use MongoDB. Some of you, I'm sure most of you have used it. That's what I'm sure, that most of you have used it. There might be someone who's never used it because you haven't taken the mobile data management course, okay? Or maybe there might be people that haven't used it because you're just taking this, you're just taking this course by itself for some reason. And that's why I did a bit of a review of MongoDB and NoSQL databases. But I don't expect you at all. My expectation is that you know MongoDB a little bit, right? And you've done NoSQL databases, yes? You know MongoDB, right? You guys? And how about you guys? Do you know MongoDB a little bit? Yeah, see, so for me to go through it again, I mean, I could definitely go through it in more detail. Not going to do it. Okay, so we're going to skip that part because you guys have done it already. Let's move on. So Mongoose, you may have done this too. You may have used Mongoose as well, or you may not have. Some people have done this, some people haven't. So now I'm going to go into more detail. So what is Mongoose? Mongoose is a Node.js module, and it is, I'm going to talk about this as a driver, really, to connect with MongoDB. We use Mongoose for this. So what we need to do is, we need to install Mongoose with our project. That's what we're going to do today, right? And what we're going to do with Mongoose is we're going to use it to connect to MongoDB, Atlas. We're going to create an Atlas database that's going to be empty. That's what we're going to do first, connect to it, and then we're going to update Atlas with some data. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to also read from the data. In order for me to read from the data, we need a Mongoose schema, right? That's what we need. So a model class. Okay, that's what we need as well. So that's what we're doing today. So we install it. We've seen this before. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use some kind of query. So this is the connection that we kind of use. Username, password at whatever the host name is. In this case, it's MongoDB. And usually they'll give us support or database. And usually this is the part people mess up, where they give you a connection, but you don't specify the database name. Okay? So let's suppose our database name was media and your collection was movies, right? You'd have to put media here, all right? And that's, people have issues with that. They mess that up when it comes to their connection string, okay? We'll figure that out. One other thing, our connection string should be private, right? So what we're also going to use is, I'm going to use .env. I'm not sure if you guys have done that as well. .env, right? So .env is a structure that we can use. And what it allows us to do is we can store our connection string as an environment variable. And we're not going to put the .env file up on GitHub, right? Because it's exposing our connection string with our password. It's very, very sensitive data. So we keep that local to you, right? And then when we actually finally go to render, when we put this up, our API up on render.com, which is where we're going to be hosting this semester, right? Then we want to create an environment variable to use instead of a hard-coded value for our connection. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's something that we're going to be working with starting today. Okay, so that's connecting to MongoDB. We're going to have two things. Now it says require here, but again, we're getting away from requires. We're using imports, and I'll show you how that looks in TypeScript, but this is the basic thing to do when we're connecting. All right, so that's how we're going to connect. And Mongoose allows us not just to connect, but it also allows us to do, I'm just going to go skip down here for a second. So not only connect with MongoDB, but also create something called schemas, which are model classes. That's what they are. So here's an example of a Mongoose schema, where, for example, this is the user schema, right? Here's an example of the model user schema, right? Where we require Mongoose, or we can import Mongoose. We create a schema. A schema in our case would be like a model. That's what we do. And then what we do is we create a user schema that has all the properties that we're going to use. So we need this, and this is going to help us communicate with the collection that we're going to put up on MongoDB Atlas. That's what this does. Okay? So we're going to do something like this, the schema itself. And we're almost at the end. I know I don't want to do too much PowerPoint, but we have to do a little bit just to talk a little bit about what we're doing today. So again, the schema is the model, and the schema allows us to do full CRUD. And what we want to do is we want to be able to use some kind of model along with our schema. So that's what we're going to do. So one other thing that I want to point out, I'm just going to skip to this part here, is Mongoose has a TypeScript helper. Let me show you what that looks like. So if we go to this little link, and I've given this to you on Blackboard as well, Mongoose, certainly you can create a schema the way we showed before, but we want to do something like this. Okay, we're going to be using this model here to connect and use TypeScript with Mongoose. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so without further ado, let's get it done. Now for today, what I'm going to be working on is in-class exercise 3, right? And I'm also going to be using my Mac Studio remote today. So just to give you that Mac experience. Now remember, last week we worked with Windows, right? So this week we're going to work with Mac. It's going to flip around a little bit. Doesn't matter. And for you, developers, you should be platform agnostic. It shouldn't matter. Windows, Mac, Linux, doesn't matter. Whatever the best tool for the job is, that's what it should be for you. And that's how I kind of treat it as well. So we don't have, from last week, in-class exercise 2. We don't have that here. So if I looked at desktop as an example, and I went to Georgian, and I went to MDEV1004, right? And you can see, well, we have in-class exercise 2 here. Here's in-class exercise 2 for last week. There it is, right? And what I'm going to do, I was also helping Ash. Hey, Ash. And we're just going to kind of go in here, and I want to start with in-class exercise 2. That's what I'm doing. And then I'm going to create in-class exercise 3 from in-class exercise 2. So first of all, let's take a look at what we have. So I'm going to go into in-class exercise 2 and just drag and drop it into Visual Studio Code. Again, this begins your in-class exercise 3. Okay? That's what we're doing here. So let's take a look here. So we've got a couple things. Server TS, man, let's run it to see what we had from before. So again, I'm going to do control backtick here on the Mac. Would you like to update? Sure, I'll update. And what we want to do on this is I want to run nodemon, right? Just kind of right away to see what we have. So there's nodemon running. I'm on the Mac, and let's just run this thing here in Chrome. I'm going to do a localhost 3000, and we had TypeScript. Welcome to TypeScript. So this is the solution from last week. That's what we had. So as of this week, going forward, we're not going to use any views because we're not making a web application with views. We're making an API. So this is where now you're going to depart from what you've done before. Maybe up to now you've done some stuff. This should be somewhat new for you. Okay, somewhat, at least. So we're not going to do it in here anymore. It works, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to use a tool called Postman. Okay, Postman. So postman.com, you can sign up for free. Okay, that's what it is. And what Postman allows us to do is we can query our API. There's two things. You can download a tool. Okay, and if I sign in, let's see if I can actually sign in. And if it recognizes who I am, there we are. If I sign in with Postman, then what I get here is some stuff that I had. This is from other courses. I have my workspace. And what I can do is I can create new workspaces here in Postman that I can work with. So these are my workspaces. If I want to make a workspace for today, then I kind of do this. So please, if you haven't done Postman before, sign up, sign in. Have you guys done Postman? You have? See, some people have, some people haven't. This is good. That means there's going to be some new stuff. Yay, right? So please sign in with Postman and create a new workspace. So again, under workspaces here on the left, you can also download the tool. If you like the tool instead, there is a Mac tool you can download for Postman, which is a separate application you can download. I'm going to try and just keep it online. And for this, I'm going to create a new workspace. I'm going to call this workspace, instead of blank workspace, right? Because I don't want that. Let's cancel that. Let's do that again. So workspace, and then I'm going to make a new workspace called MDEV1004-Summer 2024. That's the new workspace, yeah? I'm going to do it right now. So create workspace, and then that's all it should be. So if I did it right, it's a blank workspace. That's the kind of thing I want. There's different kinds of things here I can choose to. What's your workspace? I'm going to click next, and then the name, which is, like I said, MDEV1004, and then M2024, which is what my workspace is going to be called. If I can call it something right and spell it right, how about that? I didn't spell it right correct at all. There we go. And then who do I want to share it with? Only me, or do I want to share it with you guys? I'm only going to do it for me. I'm going to show it to you, but you guys are going to have your own. I'm going to click create. And when I do that, I have my MDEV MDEV1004 M2024 workspace. Keep it simple, guys. Don't make it so crazy, right? Awesome. Okay, so now that I have my workspace, I need this because I'm going to use this thing. And notice that there are some things that I can do, right? So overview is one, and there's this little plus button right here. And this little plus button, I can do things like do a get request, do a post request, do a put request, do a whatever, right? And this is what we're going to start off with today. It's very, very simple. Okay, so that's what Postman is going to help us do. We're no longer going to need this. We're not going to need this anymore because we're not going to actually have any views anymore, right? After today. All right, so on that then, back to our code. We had this, let's control C out of here, all right? But we want to modify this, and I want to make a brand new project so that way we don't mess up what we did last week. So here under ICE2, I'm just going to make a copy paste operation here. I'm going to ICEs, here's ICEs, and I'm just going to copy and paste. So Command C, Command V, right, will give us another copy of ICE2. We're going to call it ICE3. This is for this week, right? And then once we've made a copy, here's ICE3 as a copy, I want to drag that into our Visual Studio Code. Okay, so pretty simple. You guys have done this before. Now, let's review our project a little bit, right? And let's go, we'll start at the bottom. We'll start at package.json. So package.json, it has ICE2 in it. Let's change the name from ICE2 to ICE3. Again, that's one thing. Let's go with version 0.03 because this is kind of the third version of things we're doing. These things aren't going to change for now, but we're going to add to them. So again, Command save. That's what we've changed, just one thing. Next thing what we're going to do is in our server.ts where it says ICE3, ICE2 server, we're going to make it ICE3. Again, this is minor, but we're going to put it anyway because we want that. And we're going to change that Command S. And remember, one thing we're doing because we're using TypeScript is we have to remember to transpile, right? So there's two things you can do here. You can do it manually. You can do something like TSC -W, which actually does a manual transpile, right? It also does a watch task. So it watches for any changes. And then if we did it here, we need another terminal. Let's add another terminal in here. So the other terminal can be used to run nodemon if we need to run it, okay? We're not running that yet, but we've transpiled, which means if I go back to server.js, you can see that the changes should be reflected here, right, in our thing, where it should say ICE3 here. You can see that transpiled, okay? Excellent. We did this nice. And the next part, the server. All right, so let's close some of these down. On the server folder, some of you didn't get this, by the way, right. Some people had a views folder here, and they were referencing script app.js as an example, and guess what? Our scripts app.js wasn't connecting properly. Well, after this, we won't need views, and we don't need client either. Client was just for last week. I don't need a client. If I'm going to have a client, I'm going to use React, I'm going to use Angular, I'm going to use something else, Vue, whatever, right? So client is not required, and neither is views. These things we can get rid of. But before we do that, let's configure, here's our configuration. Let's configure our changes here in app.ts. So how does this work? Well, it says we set the view engine here, app set views, and we path join dir name with views. That's what we did, okay? So if we don't want to use this, sorry, I'm just gonna make sure I launch, because I'm working with one window here, and this is a bad thing. 1 second. I'm just going to, 1 second, I'm gonna make sure I launch my browser in the other window, just in case I need to look something up. There we go. And then I can go back to this one. So we don't need this, right, at all, actually. And the thing with it is, if you think about it, right, if you think about why we don't need it, because we're not going to do an application with views anymore, right? We're going to use some kind of API. That's what we want to do. And the idea with this entire thing, right, when it comes to how we're going to create everything, is we want to make it so that the API itself does not require any views or any kind of client at all. Okay, that's what we want to create. So then we can simplify. Well, we can definitely simplify some of this. All right, some of this. So let's remove this part. So this part, gone. We don't need the view engine. Okay, so no more view engine setup. Right, so that if we get rid of the view engine, then we can do a Command S to save. That's the first step. We get rid of the view engine here in app.ts. The next part is, this is okay, but now we have this whole client folder, and we can get rid of this whole thing. So right click and just delete the client folder, again, as we're converting. So no more client folder, move to trash, right? So no more client folder at all. And under servers, we don't also need views. So we can delete the views folder altogether. So let's delete that too. So no more views, move to trash. So we don't have views inside here at all. Does that make sense? We don't need them, right? So why would we want them? So this part here is also something we have to change, where it says app use express static blah blah blah. We can get rid of this too, because we don't need that, right? Remember, we're only going to need the things. We're going to slim this down a lot because we don't need this stuff. If we don't need it, we're not going to use it. Okay, next. This, normally with our router, we use the slash, right, for web application. But for most APIs, most of them, 100% of the time, we use some kind of thing in front, like /API. So we're going to put this as /API. And that means when you want to get data, you have to go, our endpoint is going to start with /API/ and whatever we're going to do. Okay? Whatever that's going to look like. So that's how it's going to be there. So that's the next change. So that's we're just restructuring here. We're restructuring. Okay? Just that we're on the same page. All right. Questions so far? Again, we're just deleting and restructuring. Next. We have routes. Here's our routes. And if I go to our routes folder here, here's our routes folder. If I look inside of index.ts, what we're seeing is a res render. Here's a res render. This is wrong, right? We can't render anything anymore because we don't have a view engine. So we can't do that anymore. So what do we do instead, when it comes to this, right? Because we need to think about how we're going to kind of get along, right? Well, first of all, we do need the slash. This is important. But we want to do something here like, and I'm just going to put this in, I'm just going to erase this for a second. But what we need to do is we need to kind of like display some data. That's what we're going to do here. Basically, is display some data. That's what we're going to do in this route, okay? And the functional logic for doing this in this display some data area here is going to be housed somewhere else. It cannot be here anymore. If I put data logic here, then actually I'm combining my route with my controller. If I want to support a model view controller design structure, we need a controllers folder. That's what we need, okay? A separate folder. So back to server, right? What I want to do is I want to make a brand new folder, and we want to call this folder controllers. Okay, our controllers folder. So we have our config folder, we have our controllers folder, we have our routes folder. That's what we have, right? And again, please keep in mind why I'm doing this stuff, right? Because we need all of these things to jive the right way. So the controller folder, if we think about what that is, right? We need to have a controller folder that's specific for the type of thing we're doing, right? What we want to do is we want to create a movie database, right? Some kind of movie database. So what we want really is the movie controller, right? That's what we want, okay? So I'm going to put that in. Remember, the controller is just a place for logic, like functions. So for now, I'm just going to make a note here. I'm going to call this the movie.ts file. The movie.ts file is just a movie controller. So we're going to say, movie controller logic goes here. That's what this is. Okay, very simple. We don't have it yet, but we're going to get it. And also, because we want to support the model view controller structure without the view, we need models, a models folder. So let's go back into server, and we're going to make a new folder, and we're going to create a models folder. So models. There we go. And of course, since we're making a movie thing, right, then what I want to do is, again, make a new file. And we're going to call this file movie. And the reason why we want this is because this is going to be, you know, so the movie model goes here. Does that make sense? So let's save all this stuff because none of it's saved. By the way, this little circle here, remember it means not saved, right? So this is all of it. This is, you know, we've saved all these things, movie folder, right? So now we have a different structure. We have a config folder, we have a controllers folder, we have a models folder, and we have a routes folder, okay? What I want to do to support all this, and again, we need some stuff. And one of the things that we need when it comes to this thing is we need to update our package.json. That's what we need to do. We need to add stuff to our package.json to help us out. All right. So I need two things. I need a .env here in my package.json, which is again, if I was to look at package.json here, that's way down here. That's package. We need to add a couple of different modules. One of them is .env, right? And the other one is mongoose. Those are the two things we need. Let's add those in right now, okay? Let's add those in. And also, I like to use express session, even though we don't need it yet. But we may need it in the future if we're going to use things like authentication, and especially if we're going to use, you know, if we're going to store information somewhere on the server side, then I want to use express session, server side sessions, okay? So let's do this. I'm just going to add that in. I'm going to use yarn for this. So here's the first one. So I'm going to say yarn add, right? And what I want to add is three things. .env, that's going to be where I'm going to keep my sensitive passwords and stuff like that. So I'm not going to put up on GitHub, right? .env, I'm going to put in as well express session. I'm going to use that because we're going to need that in the future for authentication. And then mongoose. Notice I'm doing it all on one line. And if I do this and press enter, you can see that it's going to add those three things in here. So mongoose, express session, and .env. Those are the three things I just added in. We're going to do more. Not yet, but this is the first part. Part two, we need to have some of them require, but not all of them, require dev dependencies for this. Dev dependencies, which is a type definition libraries for this. So let's do that next. So we can do the same thing. Now, good thing is that .env doesn't need it, right? So we don't need to put that in. And we don't need it for mongoose because that's built into mongoose. But we do need it for express sessions. We're going to say yarn add at types, and we're going to say express dash session, and we're going to say dash dash dev. Dev means a development dependency. And so we want this to go here instead of here. Okay, that's all it is inside of our package.json. So then we did that. You can see that express session got added, and we're good to go. Okay, so pretty good. Now let's configure some stuff. We added express session and .env. Let's start with configuring these two things. But first, what I want to do is I want to put all this up on GitHub because we made some changes. We added some files. We have in-class exercise 3, lots of stuff. Let's put that up. So we'll say git add dot. Git commit -m, and we'll say added project files for in-class exercise 3. There we go. And git push. And what that's going to do for us, it's going to allow us to look at here to our GitHub and so on. And one thing we also see here is that there is a Dependabot alert. This is a new thing, relatively new over the last couple of years, where they have something called Dependabot. And what Dependabot does is it kind of looks and says, you have a vulnerability. Take a look at your GitHub repository because you have a problem. So how do we do this? If I go to Chrome, and if I look at GitHub, let's take a look at that for a second. So here's Georgian, right? Again, I'm using the Mac for all this. And you can see here is my ISIS folder. And at the top, you can see that there's 4 security issues up here at the top. See that? 4 security issues. So a lot of times what we can do is it says enable vulnerability. It says security policy is disabled, security advisories. There's all these things here. But we have these security issues. And it says a couple things. It says that code scanning alerts, right? It says automatically detect common vulnerability and coding errors. Let's set that up. So that we can set that up right away. And we click on Save Changes. And what this does, we have to authenticate ourselves. I'll do that right now. So dependabot alerts can't always be solved. They can't always be solved so easily because it's not about us, right? It's about the person who created the modules. It's not our problem. It's the person who made the modules that we're using. There's a hole, a security hole, or whatever that's there. All right, so that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to set that up. So save changes. There we go. And if I go back to security, that's the first thing. So we've set up code scanning. We can set up a security policy, to make sure. There we go. So start setup. And we can follow this thing where it says, use this section to tell people about which versions of your project are currently being supported with security updates. So this is kind of neat, right? If you really want to do that. I'm not going to do this. I'm telling you what you could do. Let's go back to here, security. And dependabot alerts are the things we really want to take care of, okay? So here's some stuff that we really want to look here. So one of them is EJS template injection vulnerability. Take a look at that. That's like 2 weeks ago it was open. If I click on that, it says critical. That's not for this, but actually for in-class exercise 1. Take a look at it. In-class exercise 1. And it says we can create a dependabot security update where it updates to version 3.110, right? Because it was an earlier version of stuff. Take a look. It says affected versions or anything less than 3.17. We use 3.1, higher than 3.110. All we need to do is just basically create security update. And it actually does that for us. It actually updates everything for us. And look, it's 9.8 out of 10. That's how bad it was for this security dependabot alert, all right? 9.8 out of 10, crazy, right? So we're gonna take this, we're gonna fix this security vulnerability. Now, guys, we're not using this for anything. So really the risk for us is 0, right? I mean, what are they gonna do? They're gonna hijack my, my code here. I mean, I'm not putting it up anywhere. So you can see that it's gonna be fixed. So this is the thing. So this is fixed. And once it bumps it from 2.62 to 3.10, and then if I go back to security updates, right, as an example, you can see that dependabot alerts, it says, here it is, this is the security injection vulnerability. Review the security update. It tells us what we did. Here's reviewing it, right? Merge pull request, right? Merge pull request, confirm the merge. And once we've done that, my friends, pull request successfully merged and closed. And then if I go back to my security update, right, then we should have only 2. Take a look at that. We only have 2 left in terms of dependabot things. Here's another one, 2 weeks ago. So again, in the first week, we had all these problems, right? So let's fix this one, hi. Okay, so again, same thing, create dependabot security alert, and it's gonna go through and fix our problem. Now, question, is this gonna fix our local GitHub or Git repository? Nope, we have to pull. So after this, before we do anything, we're gonna pull, because otherwise, we're still gonna have those vulnerabilities, right? So one thing we do, whenever we see them, we're gonna see lots this semester, where we see, oh, there's a problem, whatever. And we're gonna fix it online here. And then once we fix it online, oh, look at this, dependabot cannot update QS to non-vulnerable version. Look at that. That's like gonna be always with us, right? That happens, right? Because it's not up to us, it's up to the developer, right? Okay, let's continue. And the other one is, what's the other one that we got? High and moderate. Let's see if we can fix this one. Create a dependabot security update. Sometimes it can do it, sometimes it can't. This is automatic. Like, we don't have to do anything here. It just does it for us. I think it's a great little tool that GitHub has put out to help us out with security problems, but doesn't always work. Okay, so let's see if we can fix this one. And then we'll pull everything down. So that's first things first. Let's see if we can get this done. By the way, guys, please stop me if you think it's crazy what I'm doing, whatever. If I'm doing something wrong, you don't agree, stop me, right? Confirm the merge, and We're good. Okay, so now that we're good, we should only have really one security update. You know, depending upon alerts, we should have one, maybe, or zero. Look at that. So 1 or 0. And that's great. If I refresh the screen, sometimes you'll see the security updates went away. I don't have any more security updates. Now what we need to do is go back to our project here and just do a git pull. You must do this, git pull. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull the latest versions to our changes, right? Otherwise, we're going to have problems. We won't be able to push anymore, right? Because we made changes online, but we didn't do changes locally. So we need to do this. Okay, just keep that in mind, please, because it'll cause potential issues. All right, great. Let's clear that up. So we've done our first push, but now we need to do some configuration changes because we've added .env, we've added Express Session, we've added Mongoose, but we haven't done anything with them. All right. So next step is really we're going to go into our config in our app.ts. Right, so that's the first thing. So again, I'm just going to go here. And in our app.ts here, I'm going to start thinking about adding the things in that I want. Okay, so that's what I want to be able to do. And the first thing is I want to add in .env. So how do I do that, right? Well, we can always read about it. So here's something, right? If I remember, I've added some stuff in here. Let's go to npm.js. That's where we're looking. And we can look at .env, because we're going to look at some of these new modules. And under here, there's the exact match. It gives us some examples about how to make it work. So we installed it, and then we have to require it. We did that. We're going to do that in a second. And we're going to launch config. That's all I have to do, just launch config like this, .env config. So that's pretty simple, actually. So let's go back and do it. So back to here. So first we're going to import it instead of requiring it. So here we're going to do that. We're going to say import, right, .env from .env. And then before we do anything else, we're going to say .env config, like so. And what this does is it configures our environment variables to work. In order for us to use the environment variables now, we need a special file. We need a special file. And that special file is the .env file. It's got to be in the root of your project, right? Where it sits. So that's where it's going to sit, in the root of your project. And that is where we're going to have it, okay? So it has to be somewhere where it's accessible, right, to everything. And so it's going to be something that's in here. So we're going to make a new file. So make a new file down here. We're going to call it .env, like this, right? And the .env file is going to have specific details for our MongoDB URI connection. We're going to create that in a second. On that, in our gitignore file, we do not want to include the .env file. So .env is going to be not included because we don't want to put this up. How would that help? If I'm including in sensitive information and then I'm putting it up on GitHub anyway, that doesn't make sense. Let's not put it up on GitHub because it's only for you. Okay, so when you do your video with me, right, sometimes, remember, I can't test your code unless I have the .env information, right? I can't do any of that stuff. If you want me to test your stuff, what I'm going to ask you to do sometimes in your video, not this time I don't need it, but maybe in future times, I might say, show me your .env, you know, in your video, or include it in your submission for your in-class exercise. So that way I can recreate that data. Otherwise, my project, if I download your project, won't work because I don't have that data. I don't know what that is, right? And so we're going to have to do this. But for now, we don't care. I'm just showing you the process. All right, so this is the first part. All right, great. So we've got our .env, and we've added .env support. That's fantastic. Let's put this up on GitHub. So again, I'm going to save, control backtick. I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say added .env support. That's what we kind of did, and then git push. Nice and easy. We've done another commit, and we don't have any of these vulnerability warnings anymore. They're gone. Okay? And that's an important thing. Next, before we use Mongoose, it doesn't make sense to add Mongoose in. We need MongoDB. We need to have a a database somehow, right? So let's do that. I'm just going to go to Chrome, and I'm going to go to MongoDB Atlas. You can actually just do MongoDB Atlas. If you type this in, and then it'll take you to MongoDB, right? And then it might ask you to sign in, like me. I'm going to sign in with Google. And once I've done this successfully, then a couple things. I have some projects that I'm working on. So here's a project that I worked on before. So that's M2024, right? I was working on that. I need a new project, right? So what I want to do, because you can see that there are several projects. These are all the different projects I'm working on, right? As an example, from other courses and so on. I want to make a new one, right? So, well, how do I do that? If I go here, does it help me? It goes project settings, project support. And if I click on Atlas by itself, it gives me a list of all projects here. So some of them I'm going to delete this semester. Like for example, I might delete the one that I did last semester, the last time I did this course, and last summer, right? But let's make a new one. So I'm just going to go here and click New Project. And then in this new project, what we want to do is we want to specify what the project is going to be called. So let's name my project something. So for me, it's going to be called MDEV1004 in the summer 2024 semester. That's the project name. Any tags we want to use here, it says tags, this is a new thing, efficiently label and categorize your projects. The project can have a maximum of 50 tags, and you can use key value pairs. So if you want to search for certain things, type of project you're making, whatever. We don't have very complex projects. We're going to click next here. Next, it says give your members access to permissions below. Well, that's going to be me. All right, so I'm going to say create my projects, just me as the project owner. I don't need you to do this for me. You don't have to give me access to your database. I may ask you in your in-class exercise to show me your database. Show me your database, show me your collections, those kind of things. But I probably won't ask you for access. Like, it's too much. I'm just going to check your API. I'm going to go to your API and see what I get. Like, because eventually your API is going to be live, and I can just check your API, right? And if I can get the data, awesome, right? All right, let me create my project. Let's create my project. And it's going to take a few seconds to do this. What it's doing is it's provisioning, that's what it's called. It's provisioning a database for me, right? But for now, it says we want to create a cluster. Okay, so a cluster is kind of like, for every project, it can have one or more clusters, and a cluster is like the actual database itself, or even if you want to talk about it as backups or whatever. I'm just going to create my first cluster. When we do, you can name it whatever you want. Okay, so here's cluster 0. Cluster 0 makes no sense. It says you cannot change the name after it appears, and it says invalid cluster name. The reason why is because this has to be unique. If you actually go here and see why, right, because it's a thing, it says it must be unique. So call it something like that makes sense. Like maybe it's going to be something like MDEV1004, and it says media, right? And if it's got a problem with it, right, it's going to say no good, right? It won't work, right? You can also use lowercase. It's okay. For example, MDEV1004 media, right? And it tells you how many characters it needs and all that stuff, and if it's going to work. It asks you if you want to preload sample data. No, we're not going to use this. So we're not going to use this preload sample data. And there's 3 providers that it recommends: AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. I found that Azure, not that we're going to use this at all, Azure has the closest connection to us, which is Toronto, from a data center perspective. Not because AWS and Google Cloud are bad. Like if I go to AWS, you just see that we don't have that. We have US East, close enough. That might be okay. And there's also Montreal here. We could probably use Montreal. It's not terrible, right, as a data center. And for us, because we don't have a lot of volume, we don't have anything we're going to do. It's not like we're making a lot of transactions. Who cares? Anywhere in the world is probably going to be okay, right? But I'm just showing you that each one of these things, these providers, is like, well, who are you going to use as a provider? They don't have render here, okay? That's our provider. That's what it's going to be, right? But for us, we don't care. We can just choose one that has the closest place to us. There's one too. So Google Cloud also has Toronto, okay? So one of these two things. It's really up to you, right? I'm going to use Azure. So I'm just going to go here and just put in, just scroll down here to Toronto, right? And we can tag this if we want, and so on. And then it's going to say, if you notice what it says create deployment. You can also do an advanced configuration here. We're not going to do the advanced configuration right now. So first of all, we declare this and we just create our deployment. There we go. So now the next thing is, how do you want to connect? Do you want to connect with a username and password? Do you want to connect with a certificate? I'm going to use the classic username and password. I think that's pretty good, okay? The username, pick something else, guys. Pick something that you're going to work with that's not your real username, okay? If you're going to use this online, like, don't use a common username that you use, okay? Like, if your name is Tom, like me, don't use Tom, okay? That's bad. Don't use something, use something else. And so I'm going to use Thomas, just because I don't really use that for anything, except for school, right? And the next thing is password. So this is interesting. It says Thomas and password, and it allows you to auto-generate a secure password, right? So yeah, we can do this. And what I'm going to do instead, I mean, I can certainly do this, no problem. I could also make my own password, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if I really want to. But I like this auto-generate secure password thing. If you don't like this password it gave you, that's fine. I can create my user, but before we do this, guys, okay, before we go on, make sure you copy this password, because you're not going to be able to use it ever again. You won't get this again. It won't show you the password after this. So make sure you copy it here. So I'm going to copy the password. There it is. And because we have our Visual Studio Code open just somewhere in here, maybe even in the .m file for now here, I'm just going to put in the password. So I'm going to say password is equal to, and then, you know, kind of paste it in. I don't need it right now. I'm just going to put it in temporarily, just so that I know what it is, right? Okay, so that's what it is. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to create my user. So Thomas is the user, create my user, right? And now it's going to say, where would you like to connect from? Am I connecting from the cloud, or am I connecting from my local environment? I'm going to click local environment. That's fine. And now this is very important. What IP address are you going to connect from? Am I going to connect from the school all the time? If I limit my IP address, like if I say something like add my current IP address, guys, remember that is the school's IP address if you're here physically, right? And that means when you make changes to MongoDB online, you can only do it from the school. If you're at home, you can only do it from home. This might be limiting for you. So we're going to put in, for us, for our learning, 0.0.0.0, and as the description, we're going to put in everywhere. Or we'll say everywhere. There it is. That's our description. Right? And we're going to click on add entry. And what this is going to do is basically it's going to say that we can connect from everywhere. Look, it even has my IP address at school. I'm going to remove this IP address. Okay, so I don't need that, just everywhere. All right? And why? Because I don't want any problems from you guys. Like, for example, if you say something like, Tom, I don't know why, but I can't connect to my MongoDB Atlas. Well, because you put in your IP address, and then you move from one classroom to the other, or something happened in school and it's not working anymore. Right? So that's the big problem. So let's click finish and close. Finish and close. And it says, congratulations, it's all set up. Hide quick start guide in navigation. You can visit project settings and access it in the future. And then let's go to overview. So this is my overview now. We have our cluster. This is our cluster, right? And what we want to do is I want to create my first database. So on the left, you can see that there's database, right? And we have our cluster, which is MDEV M2024 or MDEV media, right? And we have to wait because our cluster being created. This takes some time, okay? And so what happens with the time it takes is, you know, it's going to take whatever time it's going to take. Let's take a look here at our structure. One thing is we always want to create our free tier starting off, right? So whenever we do this kind of stuff, we want to be able to edit our configuration if we can, and make sure we're using a free tier of accessing this stuff. We don't want to pay for anything. Right now, my cluster tier is M10. Look at that. Is that free, guys? Might not be, right? So we're going to fix this up in a second, right? So we want to make it a free tier. So app services are here. You can see that there's app services here, and it gives us some additional information. Build your own app. We can do real-time syncing. They have React.js and Realm web boilerplate that you can download, a GraphQL, and React app boilerplate, you know, whatever you want, right? I'm not going to use these apps. I'm just going to go back to data services, and I'm waiting for my database my cluster to be created. And until this is done, I really can't do much of anything right here. I can't even connect to it, which is something that we're waiting to do. Again, it takes some time for us to do this. So again, do I want this? Do I want to? Now, something else I mentioned earlier today is the version of MongoDB that it's using. This is using 7.0.8, 708. And if you remember my PowerPoint document, let's see if I can go back there. In my PowerPoint document, I said that if you wanted to download and install MongoDB on your own, if that's what you really wanted to do, I'm just going to go back here. Oop, there we are. It's 7.0.9 is the latest version you can download. But the latest version that's online is not 7.0.9. You can see that it's 7.0.8 is the version that we're using. Okay? Let's just refresh and see if we're done provisioning. It's not done. So this is a great time to take a break. 12:06. We've been working for about an hour and a bit. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, hopefully this cluster will be finished provisioning and we can continue with what we're doing. All right, I'll stop recording now.